Hello and welcome to a new episode of Everstage's Go-to-Master Show, Season 3, where we converse with RevOps and go-to-market leaders from some of the most successful companies today and learn from their unique stories. Joining us today is Brian Jakins, VP of Global Sales at ST Engineering iDirect. Thank you for being with us, Brian. It's a pleasure to have you. Can you maybe get us started by telling the audience a little bit about yourself and your trajectory?
Yeah, Jose, thanks very much for having me on the show. It's a pleasure to be here. So a bit about myself. For the last 2.5 decades, I've been at the forefront of sales leadership in the technology, communications, and space-based, let's call it the space race environment, all the way from the beginning, early days of GSM, moving into where we are today from direct to device, from a satellite perspective. Where I am currently today, I am the Senior Vice President of Global Sales for ST Engineering iDirect, and we're a technology-based business focused specifically on communications in the telco and space domain.
Are you providers of hardware or software for some of the providers?
Indeed. So, the space game or the communications game is based on three segments. The first being obviously the assets in the sky, but then they need to connect to something on the ground. And we provide the ground infrastructure and software solutions that, provide that connectivity, that end-to-end connectivity, whether it be for a telco or for a private enterprise. So we cover the full spectrum, yeah.
So you've seen pretty much the whole gamut from GSM to today, yes, the space race, as you call it, but low Earth orbit satellites. It's exciting stuff is happening. I guess it's continuously happened in the industry. But you've seen all sorts of every wave of connectivity. How has this journey shaped how you think about networks now? And what is there anything now that's fundamentally different with space and AI and other things versus what you've seen before with GSM, 3G, 4G, other shifts historically?
Yeah, I mean, there's been a big shift. When you look at traditional GSM architecture, or when GSM was competing with what was back then known as CDMA, that was a two-horse race, and this is how we were going to provide connectivity. When you look at space or satellite connectivity, it was really used as a backup in the past, or it was providing critical communication services. Whereas today, the environment has shifted completely, moving from, back in the day when we remember when GSM was first, prevalent, it was quite a challenge or quite a celebration when you could send an SMS from one network to another network provider. So that was a big plus. And then when data became available on those networks, was it packet switched networking? Was it circuit switched networking that was providing the data? And our devices, where, just think about this, we all wanted the smallest possible handset that we could have. Whereas now we abandon every PC, any other device that we used to use, whether it be a laptop, a Mac, or a tablet, in favor of our cell phones. And the cell phone needs to have the biggest screen possible, the most functionality from a camera perspective. So when we look at the communications and how you connect with those devices, it absolutely fundamentally has changed. So it's no longer where you need to be in cell phone coverage to get connectivity to your handset, but the space race is really elevated to the point where, with low Earth orbit satellites coming into play, you can provide connectivity directly from those satellites to your handset. And this is something I thought that, science, you just can't beat the science, So, but if you look at the evolution of technology and how they reuse spectrum and what have you, everything seems possible today, Look at where Leo started. I think it's OneWeb we started probably 2012-ish, somewhere around there. It was under a different name, and there was a different founder who was really looking at that business. But it needed a lot of funding, and along came, Elon Musk with the startup of Starlink, and the rapid deployment of that constellation has provided so many more use cases and business opportunities whether it be based on the fact that you need low latency, which is the speed at which you know data travels across 2 points, um, or a volume of capacity, or easy install just with the terminals that they use. So it's definitely shifted, and where networks used to talk about ubiquitous coverage was really providing end-to-end coverage right to the edge of the network. You can achieve that today and not compromise the integrity of your network. So it's really evolved pretty quickly.
It's remarkable, and we just take it for granted. It's like this as a consumer, it's just the sea that you swim in, and it's just I get annoyed if I there's latency on a plane when I'm trying to watch high def video. It's
And the
very
expectation as a consumer is, we always want the best and we want it for the least cost. So you think of it
yeah.
when the telcos evolved from third generation to fourth generation and calling it LTE, and now moving to 5G networks and saying, well, you know, this is not an evolution from 4G to 5G. 5G is actually a different technology completely. And that's why they call it 5G NR or standalone as a separate technology. And the telcos, as a consumer, we expect the telcos to spend the money. You've got to spend the money. I want 5G in my house. I want it at my work. I want it when I'm traveling. I want it on the plane, on the train, wherever I can connect. That's what I want as a minimum. And I don't want to pay the earth for it. So as consumers, I think we're quite spoiled for choice in terms of what's available today. So if you don't have, the connectivity that you need, you can easily go and get a very small aperture terminal, what they call a VSAT or a LEO terminal installed at your home and provide that connectivity now. So, space has become cool again. Instead of just being a backup service, it's a cool technology.
Yeah, amazing. So, bringing it back to our conversation topic of sales and go to market, how do you even, like a seller in this market where there's everything is changing so quickly, how do you even keep up with this? And as you're training salespeople, you're leading people, what's there's got to be a culture shift here, how you think about these things and how you constantly up the game to just be able to stay relevant. Can you tell us a little bit about how that works?
Yeah, I mean, so from my perspective, we always have to start with the customer first. We need to understand what the customer's needs, pains, and aspirations are. Um, we need to look at you know how we address those needs, because sometimes it's customers selling into a consumer base or into an enterprise base. So understanding what your customers' needs are and what problems they have and how the solutions you have or don't yet have that you need to develop will solve their problems. I think that's where we need to start. And then um, you have to have a clear strategy in terms of how you take that to market with a customer. There's no longer, um, I think in back in the day, they always used to have this saying, a silly saying where either the salesperson would need to have a partner, a nice big house and a nice big car, and only be able to afford two of them. And that would sort of, create the typical sales animal that you would want to employ. But that is not, sales is very sophisticated nowadays. Um, it's really needs based, customer needs, and it can't be a one off sale. You need to really dive into the customer's business, understand their needs, and understand how you solve those problems. And then what cost that customer is prepared to pay for that solution that you bring to the table. And it's an evolution. It's not a once off. Um, so that's really what we train salespeople to look at today. And it takes a bit longer. It's not a quick sale. It's not something that you're going. Salespeople are obviously driven by higher achievement and wanting to exceed targets and be recognized as this savant, if we can call it that, in terms of sales methodologies and um, understanding buyer behavior and who are your sponsors within the business. And you've got to become integrated into that customer's business. And it takes a lot longer to get a good understanding of their needs and how you address those needs. So, it's really teaching that at a functional level. And then success breeds success. It's doing the time with the salespeople, understanding and trying to win. And winning is, solving those problems. Winning is not closing the deal. Winning is solving the problem and then having that reoccurring business and building up that reputation with those customers.
Yeah, makes sense. It's some of the same fundamentals that apply in other industries. It's maybe just harder and takes a bit longer, but it's understanding the business, listening to the customers. Really, no substitute for that. What about your across your career? I've noticed you've led teams across the world in Africa and Europe. Any lessons you want to share about just adjusting your leadership style across geographies, even to customer expectations or sellers themselves? Um,
Yeah, indeed. So when you look at, different leadership styles, and people will go back to saying, well, there's several different styles. Is it authoritative with a visionary? Is it participative? And these are all good things to have in terms of an understanding of how you lead a team and what you bring to that team. But building a functional team in multi cultures is just that you need to understand the culture. And um, I took on many years ago, I was fortunate enough to be engaged with a team in Nigeria. And it was a big team. And I worked for an American based company then, based out of San Jose. And, American culture with a Nigerian culture might seem uh, very different in terms of the way they approach business. But the Nigerians really taught me a lesson in terms of, um, Brian, you can't come into Nigeria and tell a Nigerian how to do his business. You need to understand the cultural sensitivities and understand that just because we say we're Nigerian doesn't mean that we are all from the same tribe or have the same background. So you need to understand those sensitivities. And what you need to do is be able to frame this in a way that our head office, being US, understands the dynamics of those cultures and how to get the best out of those teams engaging with the customers also that are locally. And that applies not just to Nigeria, it applies, across the globe. If you go to Latin America or you go into Asia, there are cultural sensitivities that you need to be aware of. And this is where it's very critical when you set up your team. You can think globally, but to do local business, you have to act locally. You have to have local people on the ground who understand these sensitivities. Um, and that's really what builds that rapport, because people buy from people. And it doesn't matter what the technology is. It's about building trust. It's about being able to communicate and articulate in a way that people understand what you're trying to present, understand that you know the sensitivities and that you're not just going to blurb off on a bunch of unnecessary information, and not be offensive. Because um, in today's society, it's very sensitive. People are very sensitive about the way you approach them, about the way you dress, the way you speak. It's a very sensitive environment today. So cultural sensitivity um, is very important when you're working across the globe. But it's also important to be able to share the vision of the company in a way that resonates locally, and addresses, because like I said, people buy from people. And once the team is comfortable with the vision, understands the strategy, understands how it makes a difference in that customer's environment, and understands how that individual contributes. Um, I always share with the team that when we're building a team, um, we have a vision, but what we're doing is we're building a picture. And you can think of it like a bit of a puzzle. And everybody contributes. Everybody has their unique piece that contributes to that picture. And only once we all make that contribution and the team comes together can you see what that picture is. And that's what defines success, in my view. So, very focused on cultures and individuals and sensitivities around that. And that's been a big learning curve, I think, and an appreciation, of different sensitivities and cultures across the globe.
yeah, it looks like there's a real balance to be had between authenticity and being who you are and representing the company while understanding the nuances, being respectful, painting a picture. Like it's a fairly complex world, which brings me to the next topic here. This must be really impactful when you're thinking about building a team, looking at people to hire, maybe some of the traits that you're looking for. Do you think this has changed your perspective, or what types of profiles do you need as you're thinking of building a high performance team in the context of this nuance you've shared?
Look, I think that that's just the one word that you mentioned there is pretty important, and it's about a team, um, and different people contribute differently to that team. You don't always have to have. You think about a sports team in any sort of sporting environment. One that might resonate. Let's talk soccer as an example. You might have defenders, wings, attackers. They all know the position that they play in the team, and you can have a team of defenders, and they're never going to score a goal. So they're never going to get over the line. So you have to have different people from different backgrounds. Um, so look, when I look at some of the I would say traits that I look, some of the core traits. I want people to have, a customer empathy. That to me, that's the most important because we're putting customers first. And it doesn't matter what you're selling. It doesn't matter if it's a service. It doesn't matter if it's a product. Um, we need to understand our customers' pains, priorities, and what they measure success as. So you've got to have that customer empathy as a compelling trait. Um, I like people who are curious. So in the past we always looked at you have to have a degree in engineering to sell technically or to sell technical solutions or whatever. Um, or you need to be a great communications person if you're working in marketing, and you have to have a degree in that background. Um, to me, it's more about what you bring to the table as an individual um, versus the educational background. I think it's important, depending on what you're selling and in what environment that you work in, that you do have the basics. If it's a very complicated solution, if it's something that's software related, you need to have the core basics or the basic understanding of the, let's call it the IT environment and what your solution will be embedded in and how it would operate and impact the network and so forth. Um, but then the person needs to have the right value mindset. And when I say that, it's people will say, okay, that's a bit tongue in cheek because everybody's trying to sell value. And that's not true. The value is we think as salespeople, this is the value that we bring to the table. But the value is measured in what your customer sees your value as, you know? So it's important that we're on the other side of the table when we're presenting these solutions. Um, and then I think, one of the most important is to have confidence with humility, somebody who can communicate with credibility. And that comes over time. So those are specific traits I think that are important in a successful sales individual. Um, and that's definitely what I look at. And I look at, the skill set and just the attitude. People say attitude and aptitude to learn, and the attitude in terms of um, you need to think about how you influence the world around you. And people always tell you that your mindset drives what comes out of your mouth, and what comes out of your mouth, your mind starts believing. So if your mind starts believing it, your customer's mind's going to believe it as well. So you've got to have that positive disposition. You've got to be somebody who's willing to engage, sit back and listen, and that's probably one of the key areas is good salespeople are good listeners. um,
Yeah,
so
makes
yeah, that
sense.
really makes a difference.
Technical knowledge and the know-how, the aptitude, there's a minimum bar. You still need that, but it's not enough, right? It's required, but not sufficient. You need to have
Sure.
the right
Absolutely.
attitude. Curiosity goes a long way. Absolutely. That in every field, I find it's a concept that people who talk just genuinely caring about what's happening, understanding the value from the customer side, just be able to put yourself in their shoes. That empathy thing is key, and ability and willingness to learn, right? You're having that mindset of learning. Um,
And you
and I
think
like
about
that.
it like that, it's people speak of, I think sales people have got a bad rep in the past because of lazy, sales, some lazy salespeople. And it's always the sales guy's fault. If it goes wrong, it's the sales guy's fault. He has to deal with a customer whose product has worked for 3 years and then all of a sudden didn't work anymore because it was standing out in the rain and there's condensation and some of the pieces are faulty. But the sales guy is the guy that bears the brunt of this. So you really need to be articulate in the way that you put a team together. So it's important, exactly what you said now. You've got to be curious. You've got to be wanting to understand more, asking the right questions, listening to what the problem is. Don't listen to want to respond. Um, and then obviously from a business point of view, the business will look at people who are analytical and can do forecasting properly. Sales guy, when he closes a deal, it's great, but the company will get upset, or the CEO or the chief commercial officer would be upset if you over your target by 10 or 15% and they didn't see it coming, or if you're under by 10 or 15% and they never saw it coming. So it takes a lot, I think, to be a good salesperson in this environment. But it's a very rewarding, I think, career. Um, if you do the due diligence and you have those traits, and you like you said, you're curious, you're asking the right questions, you have a genuine want to understand. Um, that's where success is bred.
I mean, we speak to a lot of sellers, and I have to say that stereotypical lazy salesperson, money grabbing, I just don't see a lot of them. It's just, I have a huge respect for the profession, and more, it's a really tough job to do. We're asking a lot of them, and yeah, the very successful ones command really high rewards, which is exactly what you want. Which is a good segue for our next topic. We at Everstage we deal with compensation, incentive compensation management is still our core business. So we always want to prod into how do you think about that? As we talked about how hard it is, all the traits that people need to have to be able to succeed in this space. How do you think about comp plans for this area where we're asking people to get really embedded, understand the business, long sales cycles? I'm thinking multi-threaded conversations. Just give us a bit of a download of your what do you think makes a good comp plan in your space? How do you think about that?
Look, so I think there always has to be, a reasonable base salary for the salesperson, because the sales cycle is a bit longer today, depending on what space you're in. But there has to be, great salespeople never want to be achieving 70, 80, or 90% of their number. So you have to have that incentive that says, if you achieve over 100% of your number, and think of it like this: the company's forecasting to the street saying, we're going to hit $100 million this year, and the sales team brings back 120 million. We're 20 million over what we should have been. Um, and that's where the salespeople really should accelerate. So there should be, a massive incentive to be in that accelerator phase. It could be 2 or 3 times what the standard commission should be. And then how you reward or how you pay the sales guy could be a mix of, you go and get the order, but I need you to be in it a bit long term. I don't just want you to bring me a piece of paper. So there has to be some part that's allocated to the revenue. So when the customer's happy and the customer's paid you and the company is able to recognize that revenue, that the sales guys get comped on that. So it has to be, like I said, a few dynamic pieces in there. I think you have to have a good base. You have to have uh, a variable portion, and the variable portion could be based on how many orders I receive and how much revenue the company recognizes from those orders. But good salespeople, and a lot of the good salespeople actually watch every dollar. They know where the next dollar is coming from. Um, you know, and they manage that pretty aggressively, because they want to be in that accelerator phase, and they want to be maximizing on their earnings. Because I think about salespeople, really good salespeople. I think of them as almost professional sportsmen. And depending on what sport you're in, your life cycle is not that long. You could be in the same industry, in the same company for 15 or 20 years. Um, but when times are good, they're really good and people stick around. But there's always going to be that year where it's a bit tougher, because the numbers are a bit more aggressive. The company's seen good growth, and there's more competition in the space. And then you might not get to that number that you had projected for the year. You're still making good money, but then you're not in that accelerator anymore. And when we don't get the numbers, we don't go to the financial team and say, look, your accountants, because you guys weren't capturing the data correctly and our profit and loss and whatever, we didn't make the money, or our balance sheet was incorrect. We go to the sales guy and we say, hey, buddy, or hey, lady, you missed the number. Why didn't we get there? This is what we projected. The forecast accuracy should have been within 5, 10, or 15%. So they bear the brunt of both achievement and non-achievement. So their life cycle in that phase, if it's a new product and it's really doing well, they achieve for as long as that uh, product or service hasn't got a lot of competition. But in the technology space, that really happens that there's no competition. It's everything evolves
Yeah.
so quickly. We were talking about GSM a bit earlier, and the telcos being the big investors in that technology. You look at where we are today from an artificial intelligence perspective and how much orchestration you can do in IT networks, in telco networks, in space networks. Um, and all of these contributing factors to efficiency and optimization. And it just makes the sales guy's job a little bit more difficult to get that value proposition across. So, yeah, I mean, from a compensation perspective, you need to look at it where, the company benefits, but the sales guy benefits. And when, you're overachieving, that there's a real benefit for that overachievement um, for both the sales guy and the company.
Yeah. Yeah, I picked up on the need for the larger base maybe than other industries, given the sales cycles and complexity makes a lot of sense. Holding back some of the reward for a little bit until the value is delivered. I guess it's revenue recognition. There's maybe projects take a long time to stand up and get everything in place. Stuff needs to get built. Value delivery is maybe delayed. So that's a reason to you want to keep the seller engaged with the customer and making sure that the following up on the promises as much as just having a revenue backstop for a commission. So all of that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, and it's got to be, when you look at it, the project might have different milestones in it where it delivers certain hardware or software or services over a period of time. And the company can only invoice once those projects are completed. And then the company gets its money. And at that point, the sales guy should be recognized for that revenue as well. So some of them are cyclical like that. And then, for a base, the sales guy also has to live. I mean, I've seen both spectrums where the guy has a reasonable base or a good base based on he's in the technology side or he's selling software and it's a long sales cycle. But I've seen top sales guys who start every month with a very, very small base and they've got to go out and hit those numbers. And this is normally in the FMCG sort of environment, very consumer based um,
Mm,
products. And that's very different. That works very differently. And those guys just they work month to month, and it's a real slog. So yeah, different strokes depending on the solution or the product that you're selling. But in this game, in the technology side, I find that like you summarized there, there's a higher base, there's potential for upside, there's huge potential if you're really doing a great job. And that's where the sales guy wants to operate.
that's great. You touched on AI already. Let's get into a little bit about that. What do you see the biggest impact of AI in your world and the daily life of a salesperson, sales manager?
Well, I think, good salespeople are going to use AI to their advantage. They're going to use it for research. They're going to use it for demonstrations. They're going to use it for simplification. Think about forecasting. Think about, the sales guy is not just about closing the deal. A lot of salespeople will tell you, well, 60% of my time is spent internally, because I need to forecast. I need to manage my global accounts better. I need to do account planning. I need to look at all the different um, solutions that I can put together. And I think that where artificial intelligence comes in, it can do 70 or 80% of the job with reasonable accuracy that a sales guy needs in the back end of his job. And that's going to give him more efficient time or more efficiency so he can get out onto the road and spend more time with his curiosity, understanding customers and the customer's customer, and how he's going to get the next sale or how he's going to do the next deal with that customer for whatever problem that they're solving. When it comes to the technology side, it's definitely about orchestration, and this is like simplifying, back end processes from an OSS BSS perspective, and that's going to drive certain levels of efficiency. But from a sales point of view, they can tap into that and automate a lot of their things. I mean, they can capture opportunities on the go, and there could be a system that automatically captures this or triggers a whole bunch of internal things that need to happen in order to put this deal into some sort of a structure. that you can present a proposal to a customer. It can simplify the proposal. It can take various keywords and build that proposal for you. And the sales guy just needs to, um, put in the cross the T's and dot the I's and make sure that all the commercials line up and the solution is articulate with what the customer was requesting. So yeah, I mean, good guys are going to use that technology to their benefit. And that's going to it's going to give them more time in the field with customers. So I think that this would be a big plus. AI used in the right environment, um, with you obviously have to have a human providing the inputs because you need to manage whatever the outputs are going to be. But I think it's going to be a big benefit in the sales environment.
Think you're right. The account planning you mentioned, I just read a post earlier today. A bank, it's doing some remarkable stuff, just automating a lot of that grunt work that needed to be done to get just an account plan in place, which reps hate doing. It's so important. And if you can get that, then yeah, your time can be spent. You're starting here instead of down here. And then you have all this energy dedicated to the real human interaction and the curiosity and just finding out those other things you wouldn't have the time otherwise. And of course, your competitors are probably doing the same things. It's a bit of an arms race now where everyone benefits if you can get on it. But yeah,
And you see
it's a
where the
big
value
risk.
is, because the value is not just to the external environment, but to the internal environment. So you, Jose, are the CEO of your company, and I'm Brian working a deal, and I've been working this deal for 3 months, and I know the customer implicitly. And but you have no view. When I come and present the deal to you, you might not know the customer, might not know the market that they're involved in. But if I had an account plan and I had shared on regular intervals of the engagement process, and I was able to automate a lot of these and send you a snapshot or a dashboard on a Monday morning that says, "Hey, Jose, Brian's doing this, and this is what the deal looks like, and this is the segment the customer's in." When I come and seek your approval to say, we've got to be very aggressive, we only want to make 68% margin on this or whatever it is, and I'm just saying that, but um, you're already going to have an affinity with that customer. It's not going to be something that I've been working on for months, and I need to now bring you across the line and educate you on what that customer is and why it matters to us as a business that we need to be able to support this customer. So you need to look at the internal process that is going to automate and share a lot of information that people are going to be able to see and say, "Well, look at these deals these guys are working on. This is coming down the line. Have we planned to receive it? Do we have the right support structures in place? Have we got enough inventory? Have we got enough people on the street, to support this?" So there's a lot of internal stuff that would benefit, or internal operations that would benefit from AI as well.
Yeah, the interaction between operations, finance, sales, delivery, engineering, um, even just some communication, just having people come along for the ride. So you're not waiting for ink to be dry to then struggle to deliver, right? And just have
Absolutely,
surprises
yeah.
at that side, or even
Absolutely.
approvals. Like you just work with the team from the beginning. Then when the CFO needs to get that approval done for the discounting, you're not having that conversation for the first time or having to surprise anyone.
And that's an important point. I mean, CFOs look for specific items. They'll be looking at their earnings before interest and tax. They'll have a look at what's the impact on our cash flow, all of these sorts of things. And you can automate that in terms of the reporting that you provide on a regular basis. So the CFO gets the snapshot. That's what they're interested in. The ops guy is interested in something different. Obviously, we all want to be making money. It needs to be profitable business, but everybody's looking at it differently. The CTO is looking at, do we have the technology? Does it solve the problem? And am I going to have to invest in additional resources to develop the solution? So different people have different requirements, and I think that you can segment this through artificial intelligence so that the people that need to see what they need to see are able to see that.
Yeah. Yeah, really fascinating. Thanks for those insights. So we're getting sort of to the closing stages. We often ask, like, any specific feedback or advice you'd give someone that's breaking into the field, go to market sales, can be industry specific or not. But what do you think people should be looking at? What would you recommend they do to stand out and succeed in the industry?
I think credibility takes time, and you need to build it over time. And I think that, you know, salespeople are always they take the brunt of the business slacking, or when there's a product or deficiency. Um, the CTO doesn't phone the CTO of your company; he phones you and says this product is crap, it doesn't work. And I would say that sales is hard. It really is hard. It's hard to be great at sales, but it's easy if you have that. If you have those traits and you develop those traits, and you spend time in self-assessment. Where do I need to improve? Do I need to dress better? Do I need to speak better? This old if you look at the way people prepare for speeches, Toastmasters, and I love watching these guys. These guys are brilliant. The way that they prepare for their speeches, or the way that salespeople need to prepare when they're engaging with a customer. Because if you can't sell it to your family, or you can't sell it to your friends, how are you going to sell it to a customer if they don't understand what you're trying to communicate? So it's important to role play. It's important to develop your skills and get critical feedback, so that you don't want to be a gift of the gab salesperson. Anybody can do that, and then you've got a one sale wonder that somebody's never going to remember from the 80s, 90s, or whenever it was. Um, and then I would say use metrics, use artificial intelligence to your benefit. And even if it doesn't look perfect in the beginning, get an understanding of what your customer is looking for, what the CFO is looking for, and try and define or design your metrics that you're sharing, that it answers those questions, because they generally ask the same questions over and over. And then to the customer, I guess it's really, build that habit of being curious, asking the right questions, listening to listen and understand, and then practice those skills. You build credibility over time. And when I say people buy from people, when somebody's stuck, and let's say we're selling IT hardware, whether we're selling servers or we're selling desktops or laptops or whatever, when it comes over that guy's table as the CTO or the CTIO or the procurement guy is going to say, I remember Brian, and he worked for Dell, and this guy delivered such great service. We're in a bit of a pickle now. We don't have the budget that we have, or we need to deliver within a certain time frame. Let me give him a call. And that's where you really start excelling, when you've got that credibility and people know that you're not going to tell stories, stories that you can't back up. It's always good to tell stories. Salespeople need to tell stories. They need to take a customer down a journey, but tell stories that are factual and not, artificially made up and something. And that's how you build credibility. So I think that you've got to be tenacious, got to be curious, and you've got to practice, and then get feedback. Get feedback from your customer.
Hmm.
Get feedback from um, customers lost. It's so important to get feedback from deals that you've not won, as opposed to
Hmm.
deals that you've won, because deals that you've won, you know what the success metrics were. But the deals that you lost, you need to get a better, because it's normally more than just price. It's something else. It might have been something you said, or something that you may have presented, or so it's always important to get that feedback. And this is how you build up your character for sales. So that's what
Yeah.
I would advocate to anybody getting into it. And again, depending on whether it's consumer or it's technology or telco, GS, whatever it is, um, practice uh, and look to solving the problem, or understanding the solution that you have and how it solves that problem. Because if you don't know what you're selling, how do you expect the person who you're selling it to know?
Totally. So yeah, be deliberate, seek feedback, listen, and yeah, storytelling is huge, huge, important skill. Amazing. So, do you have any specific resources, books, podcasts you would recommend people to listen to?
There's a lot of them. I listen to Simon Sinek quite often. Uh,
Yeah.
I love the approach, and it's so basic and what have you. And there's a couple of guys that I do listen to, and it's just to there's a guy that was based out of South Africa as well, a guy by the name of Gavin Sharples. I used to read his books and listen to some of his podcasts, and the simplicity at which he approached things. I mean, we all go for the Tim Robbins, and we look at, how does this apply to your life? And it's so big and it's so grandeur and what have you. And you try and take pieces and put that with you, and it makes perfect sense. But when you're in the fight and you feel like this giant is standing in front of you, you've got to be able to break it down into measurable pieces and say, this is how I'm going to tackle this. So I guess it's, not to believe everything that you hear or read, but to take the pieces that you can apply and how it applies to what you're going through or what you're trying to deliver as a solution or a salesperson. So those are guys that I've really, listened to, books that I've bought. Yeah. And I think that some of those learnings come out. Some of them are like staring you in the face. It's like, oh, but I know this. I bought this book and but you know it. Did you know how to practice it? Did you know how to apply it? And is it relevant to you? So those are things that those are people that I would look out for. And take it with listen to as much. Education is a good thing. To read and learn and hear what people have to say, and just remember that it's different perspectives. We spoke about this right at the beginning. Cultural sensitivities people have. They might be saying the same thing, but they say it differently, and you might interpret it differently. So it's always good to have that 360 view.
Yeah, same curiosity, apply it to yourself, to your craft. Excellent. Hey,
Correct.
this has been really, really fascinating. Thanks so much for doing this with us. I think people will really get a lot of learnings from this. I really appreciate it. So, just to formally closing the episode, this brings us to the end of this insightful episode of Go to Masters show. Thank you so much, Brian, again, for sharing your experience and valuable insights with us.
Thanks for
And
having me.
remember, you can tune in every week to learn more from game changers driving hypergrowth companies across the globe. Go to Masters is brought to you by Everstage, your trusted partner for transforming the way businesses handle sales compensation. And I'm Jose Aleman, your host, signing off for today.